I am a 28 years old female was named after a really obscure character from Greek mythology. My preferred nickname is taken from the end of my name. I always introduce myself with I'm my name, but you can call me nickname. None of my co-workers in the small business we work for have ever had a problem with this before, until Megan, the niece of Jeff, one of the two owners, was hired. Jeff and Dave co-own the business, but Dave does the actual day-to-day running of the business. I introduced myself and my nickname as usual, but she immediately said that Bessie, not the actual name, would be a better nickname because it comes from the beginning of my name and that she liked it better. I told her I really didn't like that nickname and wouldn't answer to it and asked her to please not call me Bessie, but she insisted that it was so much prettier and that I just needed to get used to it. For the next 2 months she tried to call me Bessie, but I completely ignored her whenever she addressed me that way. Even when I knew she really needed help with something. She would call my desk phone and say, "Hey, Bessie," I would reply, "You have the wrong number, there's no Bessie here," and hang up. She then tried to get some of the employees outside the office to start calling me Bessie, but I quickly shut that down. I usually finish my work early and help them with a lot of tedious little things that aren't part of my job description, and threatened to stop helping them unless they used my preferred nickname. Friday she decided she was going to get me to respond to Bessie no matter what. We have an open office design but are at opposite ends. She started calling out Bessie in a sing-song voiceover and over again to try and annoy me enough to respond. Other coworkers got annoyed, most telling her to stop and one Lisa telling me to just let her call me Bessie already. I refused and she kept calling out Bessie louder and louder, until Dave barged in. He'd been on a conference call with an important client and could hear her yelling from his office down the hall. He told her to be quiet and that if she called me Bessie one more time, he'd write her up and dock her pay. Later, Megan cornered me in the break room, called me in for getting her in trouble and called me Bessie again for good measure just as Dave was walking in to heat up his lunch. He gave her a stern look and said, "I warned you." Then he walked to HR to have her written up. Lisa is saying I'm the for never helping Megan and that, if I had been nicer or hadn't fought her so hard on the nickname, she probably would have given up on it a while ago, but because I made such a big deal out of it, it became a challenge. My 7-year-old daughter's doing virtual school in our living room recently. I heard her teacher address a girl named Kelly a few times, which stuck out to me because my daughter's class is only about 15 kids and I know them all by this point in the year. A couple times more and I realized she was calling my daughter Kelly. My daughter's name is Keely, pronounced Keely. So after school was over I asked her if that had been happening all year in this teacher's class and she said it had and it really annoyed her. I asked her why she hadn't corrected the teacher if it annoyed her so much and she said she had repeatedly at the beginning of the year, but the teacher kept calling her Kelly, so eventually she gave up on reminding her. I sent the teacher a quick email explaining the misunderstanding but got no response. This teacher teaches a special subject, think music, gym, art, or language, not just one grade level. So my daughter will be in her classes for the next several years, so we couldn't just wait it out. And how moments like these are handled now will set the stage for how my kid deals with similar situations on her own in the working world. I encouraged my daughter to come to class early or stay later again, thinking maybe she hadn't heard or understood her last time. So a quiet one-on-one would be better. She got to the class early and she told her very politely that her name was Keely like really, instead of Kelly like jelly. And that people often get it confused, so she just wanted to clarify. So class starts and sure enough she gets called Kelly again almost immediately. So there's only so much self-advocation a 7-year-old can be expected to do. I just walked over and said, "Hi, this is Keely's dad. Hers name not Kelly. It's Keely." A few hours later I had an email in my inbox inviting my wife and I to a parent-teacher conference with the vice principal. The long and short of the meeting ended up being the school feels that while the teacher probably should have learned her name, that the real problem is she feels I challenged her authority by correcting her in class and that the names were similar enough for it to not have warranted such drastic action. That surprised me. I couldn't believe a meeting was necessary, let alone that it cast blame on us. I can't tell if I'm being that annoying, my kid matters most, parent that my grandmother the schoolteacher always complained about, or if the teacher should just learn her damn name, because that's a basic part of her job. My husband and I, both in our early 30s, have been together for over a decade and made the decision to not have kids. I like kids, I have nieces and nephews, we just don't want them for our own reasons. He had a vasectomy, which only a few people know about. Our families are aware we don't want kids, as they've asked this before during different major life events, our wedding for instance. We recently bought a 3-bedroom home with a nice yard in a nice area. Excited to show our new home to family and friends, major upgrade to our previous home, we hosted a housewarming. During the party, one of my sibling-in-laws, Alex, made a few indirect comments about all this space. And kids would love it in our house, etc. Eventually they asked point blank when we were having kids. I made a light-hearted joke about it, which is my go-to for this question. Oh, well, I like sushi too much to have to give it up for a pregnancy. Plus not drinking for pregnancy and breastfeeding? No thanks. I tried to make it very light-hearted and laugh it off. Most people just laughed along. That seemed to anger Alex, and I was told children are a joy, and a good mother puts her kids before everything else. I agreed, children are a joy, I like spending time with the nieces and nephews. And obviously I can't be a good mom if I chose sushi over kids, so I just won't be a mom, paraphrased. Still trying to brush it off in a gentle way, because I'm not trying to start a fight by telling them to stop asking in front of everyone, because I know my tone will be seen as rude and abrasive. We move on. But Alex is still annoyed and making little comments in their group about how flippant I am about it and how when it finally happens, then I'll understand. My husband heard this and jokingly said, well, if she gets pregnant, that'll be a problem for the divorce lawyers. That seemed to piss them off more, but they stopped. With holidays coming up, we have not been invited to Alex's usual Halloween bonfire. When husband spoke to his parents, they told him Alex was annoyed we were so careless and callous about our child-free status and to say what we did, and they realized we had taken permanent steps to ensure we never had kids. That we know they had to do if to have kids, etc. And we are AHs to just not care. I feel bad because they did do if and lots of fertility treatments to have their kids. And even then they still had a few miscarriages. I can't imagine wanting kids and struggling to have them and then deal with miscarriages. But at the same time, I'm so tired of justifying living my life how I want. I feel terrible my joke was taken the way it was and that I hurt my IELTS. I truly never meant for that to happen. After the bonfire this weekend, we will be reaching out to have a heart-to-heart, if they'll accept it. Either way, I'll be apologizing for hurting their feelings, let them know I love their kids and them. But I will also be firmly putting down any further attempts to discuss our child-free status, if the conversation is about changing our minds. I have not told them our reasons for being child-free, so I think perhaps if they are willing to listen, I'll explain them and hopefully the conversation can be constructive. My husband Tim has a serious dairy allergy. I'm talking about an actual immune system reaction, not intolerance. His allergy is serious enough to cause acute enterocolitis, but he hasn't needed an EpiPen since he was a kid. I work full-time and also have some seasonal work this holiday season because Tim has been without work. And money has been very tight. As a result, I barely get to rest. The holidays are especially hard, and I found myself getting just one day off every 2 weeks for almost 2 months straight. As you can imagine, that day off means the universe to me. Now, Tim loves dairy, and will sometimes intentionally eat things which trigger his allergy. Lately, it's gotten out of hand, with him going from one risky meal every 4 to 6 months, to every 2 or so weeks. In fact, it always seemed to coincidentally line up with my time off, and I found myself spending my one day taking care of him. Last week, I finally asked him if he was intentionally timing it to line up with my day off. I fully expected him to say no, but he admitted that he was doing it to make sure that he'd have a nurse. And so he'd have someone close by in case he had an especially adverse reaction and needed a hospital. I was livid, and told him that he was selfish, robbing me of my rest. I said that if he made himself sick again, I wouldn't take care of him. I'm exhausted and I need to decompress. He didn't say much, so I thought he'd heard me. Fast forward to Friday night. I get home from work, and a few minutes in, Tim gets a pizza delivered. I ask him why, when I'm making dinner, and he shrugs. I ask if a large garlic Alfredo pizza is worth the pain, and remind him that I won't be giving up my rest day again. He smirks and eats an entire slice while grinning at me. I left it at that and went back to my dinner. Predictably, he got sick, profusely vomiting, retching and groaning from the intense cramping and diarrhea. I slept in the guest room to get away from the sound and smell. He called for me several times and I repeatedly told him no. Hours later, he was still sick and woke me up at the crack of dawn to go get him Pedialyte and meds because he was very dehydrated and still in pain. I told him to order it in and asked him to get out and let me sleep. He was still whimpering when I eventually got up to shower and eat. Again, I did nothing to help or comfort him. By evening, he was sulking, and by morning when I had to work, he was enraged. He yelled, and by the end of the day he told our friends and family that he nearly died and I neglected him. His family accused me of passively trying to kill him. His mom called, shouting that he could have had a life-threatening reaction due to my petty actions, and that I'm a shit wife for not minding his health. I'm starting to feel guilty because she's right and he could have been seriously hurt.